I'm going to kick it over to our special guest for the night and the Celtics head coach, Brad Stevens.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited to be a part of this and to talk about, obviously, the voting importance to us and our family, and certainly honored to join Pete and his team, and hopeful that everybody will follow suit, vote, so that we can, as your slogan says, win the era. Pete and I were talking a little bit yesterday about, leadership in general, and obviously it's a critical time and a critical point in time for our country, and we want to be part of the solution. We want to be part of making sure that we do our part to elect the people that we need to be elected. And I think all the time about, when people assume a position of leadership or assume a title, comes with a power. And oftentimes, if you elect the right people, they serve with such great compassion. They serve with putting others first, making sure that they are simply doing what is right. And obviously, with Biden and Harris at the top of our ticket, having a chance to spend time already on this call a little bit before with Amy and Natalie, who you'll hear from later, it's such a critical time. Because the other side of that is if you elect the wrong people and they choose to use that power to mislead, right, then that's just becomes something where people try to use that to rally their factions and divide. And so this is a great opportunity in the next couple of weeks. We're so excited to be a part of it. Politics is not my specialty by any means. I'm excited to join Pete. I think the thing that we have most in common is that we've both been told on several occasions that we look alike for the last how many years. My first introduction to Pete was right when he was the elected mayor of South Bend. One of my friends had a chance to meet with him. I was still the head coach at Butler University in Indianapolis. My friend came back down to Indianapolis and said, "Oh my gosh, I met this guy. He looks exactly like you. And you guys have so many of the same mannerisms. The only difference is he's a lot smarter than you are." And so I thought about it, and I kind of looked it up and followed him a little bit closer. And I know Pete's going to join us here shortly. And I started looking at your stuff, Pete, and it's like Harvard grad, Rhodes Scholar. I didn't apply for the Rhodes Scholarship. I'm not sure how that works, but I'm sure I could have had a shot. The Harvard grad, my wife and I walked through Harvard today, and we ate at Harvard today, which I think is close enough. McKinsey consultant, like we have a dog on our street named McKinsey, right? I mean, I think that, you're an intelligence officer in Afghanistan, and that's a little bit tough for me to say that I'm just a coach. But obviously, he's a lot smarter than I am. I'm thrilled to be here with him. He's the expert and has been doing the rounds all over the place, and we've all enjoyed his snippets all over the various channels that you've been hitting these days. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to support what you're doing. It's a pleasure to support your candidates, and thanks for having us.
Well, thanks so much, Brad, for joining us, and thanks for your leadership. I know, as you said, you're not always out front politically, but I know you've always been politically aware, and I'm glad you chose this moment to step up. But really, what you have been doing, what your players have been doing, what the NBA has been doing in terms of racial justice, in terms of making sure everybody's out to vote, I think it's such a great example of how leadership on the court translates into the leadership that we need in our society at a moment like this, as we're confronting all these overlapping crises, from the pandemic and public health to the moral crises that are facing our country. And I'll tell you, in Indiana at least, there's a hierarchy of major leadership positions, and a mayor of one of our larger cities is somewhere around here, and the coach of Butler is somewhere up here. So I'm honored to be here, and people have flattered me by comparing me to you from time to time. I'm kind of glad that this is a virtual event, because I suspect that if we were side by side, people would realize the resemblance breaks down when it comes to height, let alone if it came to skill. If I were ever in a situation of having to attempt to shoot a basketball, but what I know that we both share is a passion for making sure that everybody gets a shot in American life, that there is justice. And that there is a chance for everybody to thrive. And so much of that depends on leadership. So thanks for everything you're doing to make sure that people are active, that they're registered, that they're able to vote, and for everything that you've been doing. And by the way, to Tracy, who I know played a role in bringing us together and getting us involved too. With that, I want to thank everybody who's joining us, who's here with us tonight. I think this may be our last chance to come together as a community of supporters of Win the Era before the bell rings on Election Day and brings an end to voting season. And I'm calling it the end of voting season, not the day of the election, because, of course, voting's going on right now. And that is so central to our mobilization plan. Is making sure that everybody who has the opportunity, everybody's in a community that makes it possible, if they can, takes advantage of that early vote. We got some fantastic leaders here tonight. One of the best things, especially seeing so many of our just diehard supporters on the call here, that one of the best things we've been able to do as a community is introduce one another to fantastic leaders. And so I'm going to turn it over to the first of three candidates and leaders that we're privileged to be coming together around. Amy Steele is up for North Carolina House in District 82. North Carolina is the tip of the spear in terms of proving that there's no such thing as a permanently red state and really opening new territory for new leadership. She is from a military family, like so many in North Carolina, understands the stakes, is somebody who has the lived experience of leadership in education that we need so much more of, especially in those critically important state positions of responsibility, especially from her experience as an elementary school principal. But I'm going to let her speak for herself, because when you hear from her, you'll see why I'm so proud to be supporting her. Amy Steele, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Pete. I'm so excited to be here this evening. And hello to everyone out there. Wow. Thank you, Coach Stevens, and Mayor Pete. Your entire team has been fantastic. I just want to say, this is the moment that all of us have been waiting for and working toward. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. I was born to two 14-year-old parents in Houston, Texas, and the odds when I was born were stacked against me. But through exposure to opportunities and by being a military child, my dad joined the Army at age 18 and moved us to all sorts of places, but all over the world. And through opportunities that I was exposed to, I was able to get an education, use that public school education to go to school, become a teacher, and then a principal. And it was there that I discovered inequities in public education, and I understood what my calling and my mission was. So I'm honored to be here this evening, but I just want to tell you a little bit about North Carolina. North Carolina is a linchpin for this particular election. This is a state that is, of course, experts label it as a swing state. I think it's going to be a blue state with no problems, but we've got to turn out the vote. And what's unique about North Carolina is we have a Democratic governor, but a Republican-led General Assembly that has systematically dismantled the funding for public education over the last decade, and really the last 12 years. As a teacher whose salary was frozen at $30,185, I can tell you that we've got to do more in terms of spending for public education. We've got to do more to make sure we expand broadband use for our students who are facing virtual learning, but they can't even get on their devices. And we have to do more for all of those educators who are working on the front lines, but not being treated as those professionals that they are. So I just want to, again, give this call to action to all of us who are on this call, because we're all voters. I'm sure everyone on this call either has voted or has a voting plan. But your 5 to 7 friends who are not on this call may not have a voting plan. And that is your responsibility today. Your responsibility is to take this information and go out into the highways and the byways and get all of your friends together and make sure they go vote and make sure they have a plan. So if you want to support my race, I'm at amysteele2020.com. I'll post those links in the chat. And Mayor Pete, I appreciate the opportunity to address everyone this evening.
Thanks so much, Amy, and we'll speak a little more in a moment, but I'm so glad you stepped up, and please do, everybody, keep an eye on the chat window to see more ways that you can support her. Next, I want to introduce, I want to turn to Texas, and I'm going to introduce you to Natalie Hurtado, and I'll tell you one of the reasons I'm really excited about her stepping up. We have a lot of public servants who serve in constituent-facing roles, as she has in her congressional district, working at the side of a civil candidate in her county, working at the city level, understands all of the different ways in which the many layers of government affect people's lives. And many people work in the trenches like that. Some of them decide at some point that they're going to cross over and go on the elected side and put their own name on the ballot, which is a whole other level of commitment and risk. And we're glad she's taken that step because she is poised to be a historically important candidate in District 126. And Texas is another fantastic example of a state where we can send a big message by flipping that chamber. So I'm going to introduce it, turn it over to you, Natalie, and invite you to share how you made that decision and what your mission is for the next 2 weeks and the road ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mayor Pete, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. Really, my mission is it kind of goes a little bit even deeper than my experience in working with amazing public servants. At the age of 19, I was attending the University of Houston. I had met a guy. We were dating for about 4 months. I'm also a child of immigrants. And so with my immigrant parents, they came with a lot of old world thinking. And they gave us an ultimatum of either getting married or breaking up. And so after 4 months of dating, we got married. About a year after that, we had our child. By this point, we were both at U of H, both working at the Olive Garden as servers. And by this, we were sharing a car too. And I remember taking him to work and heading out with Maddie in the back seat, going to Walmart to get groceries. And I got a call from a detective who informed me that my husband at the time had been involved in a crime. And he ended up getting 2 life sentences to make a long story short. And so literally overnight, I became a young single mother. And I always say that if it were not for my family, if it were not for community, if it were not for programs such as Medicaid and food stamps, there is no way I could be in this position where I'm at today, with degrees from U of H, with degrees from St. Thomas, but more importantly, with this conviction of knowing that there are so many people out there that their voices are not being heard. We're dealing with a state that has refused to expand Medicaid. And now with this pandemic going on, has just really spotlighted the issue of people's issues and health are not being addressed the way that they should be. And so, yes, my experience in working with amazing people helped in me selecting or choosing this to be my path. But more importantly, it's my personal experiences that in talking with people day after day and realizing that it's the story of resiliency, the story that when I ran in 2018, you couldn't get me to tell my story because frankly, I was embarrassed and ashamed and I didn't know how to tell my story until I realized that that is what people connect with. So for the next 2 weeks, it is a matter of just making sure that we keep our numbers high out in the polls. I mean, we're, like I was saying earlier, we are in the headlines because Harris County is showing people what it means when voting is accessible. I mean, we have drive-through voting right now. There's going to be a point October 29th. It's going to be 24-hour voting in 10 voting locations. When you make it accessible, people come out because they want their voices to be heard. Texas is known for its voter suppression. I mean, we were ranked 50th out of, all of our states. But now we're setting the trend that we're done not being heard. This state is it is a battleground state. It's going to be a blue state. And this district specifically is going to be a blue state. So it is an honor to be here. And once again, the whole point of this is to make sure that people feel as though they're being heard and represented. And that's exactly what I intend to do.
Thank you. And thank you for reaching into your story because I think it empowers so many others to see themselves represented. And I know that's going to make you a terrific legislator, as well as the person who's going to help deliver a blue Texas. And we're just so excited. The third candidate I want to introduce you to this evening is going to take us to Florida. He's in District 118, running for Florida House. And Ricky Junqueira is somebody who understands in a very deep and real way way, what's at stake in environmental justice and the moral as well as technical dimensions of why we need to act fast in order to deliver change. He's somebody who's had impact across the country, led efforts in Flint at a time when the national media hadn't yet noticed what families were facing with the poisoning of their children. Is just one example of what's wrong, but also what could be made right if we had the right leadership. And in Florida, again, it's such an important state, driving turnout and building support in a way that I think is going to make us very pleased with Florida on election night. So, Ricky, over to you to share a little bit about how you made this decision to run and your mission for the road ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Pete. I am so happy to be here with everyone tonight. I've been reading the comments and I appreciate all the love. I have a lot of fans on your Zoom right now, Mayor Pete, because I've been involved with Sister District, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. You're building bridges, groups across the country that have been writing postcards for my campaign, and I'm just so grateful and so humbled and happy to be here. I've been, as Mayor Pete said, I've been working for the Sierra Club for the last 5 years. Before that, I was a communications director in Congress. And before that, I was in grad school and undergrad in Boston, where I got to see the Celtics' original Big Three win some championships as an undergrad at Boston University. I got to see the reverse of the curse as a freshman at BU. So our ties to Boston and to Coach Stevens are run deep. But about my race, I'm running here in Miami-Dade County, one of the most consequential counties in the state. Mayor Pete, you were here for the first debate, the first Democratic primary debate. I got to see you and your husband, and you knew from the beginning the importance of Miami-Dade and the importance of the Latino and Hispanic vote. It is up on display in this early vote time here in Florida. Democrats have outvoted Republicans by a huge margin. I think we have over a 500,000 vote margin just in vote by mail and the beginning of early vote. But it doesn't stop there, right? What's on the ballot here in Florida is our healthcare, protecting our healthcare and our pre-existing condition. We have congressional candidates that are threatening our namestays and amazing Congresswomen here in Miami-Dade County, and Debbie Murgasol-Powell and Donna Shalala. We have to protect them, and the best way to protect them is to invest in down-ballot races like my own. This district went to Hillary Clinton by 9 points in 2016, but we only won this district by 54 votes that year. It tells you the importance of name recognition and getting your message out to voters, and I think that with grassroots campaigns like my own and like Natalie's and like Amy's, we will build the trenches needed to get that sought after win, especially when the margin is 1% difference from Dem to R here in the state of Florida. And so I say that I want to give a shout out to your old sustainability director, Therese, that I worked with really closely. I covered the state of Indiana for the Sierra Club. I manage all of our communications outreach in Ohio and Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky, the reddest states in our union. I come up with the strategy and messaging to guide us forward in very Republican states. And lastly, I just want to say hi to my old residence life director, Dr. Laura DeVoe, who's a huge Pete fan and has been doing a lot of work in the community to get out the vote. And I want to thank you all. I appreciate you all. Visit voteforricky.com to learn more about the race and get involved, volunteer. And if you can give a donation, please do. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mayor Pete, and I'm here for questions.
Thanks so much, Ricky, for stepping up and for your leadership. And again, for more information, visit the websites of each of these candidates, or visit our Win the Era website to see more about why we're endorsing each of these candidates and the other fantastic leaders that we're supporting. We've got just a little bit of time for a conversation, and I'm eager to hear a little more, especially because each of you is campaigning in many novel ways and maybe some old-fashioned ways too, side by side, knowing that at the end of the day, this is all about voter outreach. That's one thing that hasn't changed even in 2020. So I'd love to know if there are any favorite experiences, stories, or voters. One of the best things about running for office, as you know, is the way that you extend yourself to get to know other people. And I would love to know from each of you something that really you think you're going to remember long after this campaign season about voter outreach, whether it was in person, virtual, or in some other way. Ricky, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I just think, especially with everything going on now, Amy and I actually know each other from a couple of other groups that have been supporting us, and we've done a couple of these Zooms. I think that this cycle, the focus on these state house races or these down ballot races have been so important. I think Virginia did it and switched the focus onto us, and that we could actually achieve this, in North Carolina, in Texas, in Florida. I think that, that has been like the pivot that we've seen in this cycle.
Natalie, how about you? How's your experience been in Texas, and any voter interactions really stand out for you?
Yeah, actually, it's one that I just had this past weekend, and it's this idea of relational organizing. I was outside decorating my house, getting it ready for Halloween, had my girls with me, and this van pulled up in front of my house, and this older man, I think he must have been in his 80s, rolls down his window, and he's like, "Are you Natalie Hurtado?" I look back and I'm like, "Yes, I am." And he's like, "I need a word with you." So I go over there, and he tells me, "I voted Republican ever since I can remember." And he said, "This is the first time that I'm going to vote for a Democrat." And he said that, "But I need you to make a promise." He said, "I need you to promise me that you're at least willing to listen to the other side and compromise." And I told him, "Sir, that is a promise that I'm going to make and I'm going to keep." And he said, and his reasoning was because he's sick and tired of us not being able to even have a conversation about our issues. And I told him, "Sir, I couldn't agree more. The issues that we're talking about, they shouldn't be these partisan issues. I mean, for God's sakes, COVID had never been a partisan issue." And that's unfortunately where we're at because of the lack of leadership that we've seen at all levels. And it's a memory that I'm going to keep forever. It's one that, as a Democrat, when you're knocking on doors, you're always afraid that you're going to approach this, hardcore Republican that's just going to, want to do something ugly. But for this man to approach me and knowing his voting record, his entire life, and to say, "Enough is enough, I'm going to vote for you," that just spoke volumes to me. And it told me that this is what people are wanting. They're wanting civility. They're wanting to have conversations once again and get our country moving forward.
So what a powerful story. And it's a great example of one of the joys of the building bridges that you get to do in campaigning. Amy, how about you?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things to do is to talk to tiny constituents. So as a former teacher and principal, I'm all about children. I love children. So I literally have thousands of students I've impacted or worked with within my district after having been in education for almost 15 years. So when I'm at a polling location and children run up and they're like, "Should I hug? Should I not hug? We're in the middle of COVID. What to do?" That's just a super special moment for me. It's special because, the kids still recognize that, I'm definitely there for them. I'm fighting for them. And they know that I have their best interest at heart. But it's also special when they come to our campaign office or they come to volunteer for the campaign. So we have students who, they're 7, 8, 9 years old. They write postcards. Some of them make phone calls, and some of them do literature drops in a safe, COVID-friendly way with their families. But having my tiny constituents there, it really reminds me of why I signed up to do this and why I left my job as a principal to run for office to help address some of the educational issues in our state. So that's been my hands down #1 favorite thing to experience, is working with my little tiny constituents on this election cycle. And I also know that every kid has the power to impact their parents' decision to go vote or not. So the more kids we impact, the more they're going to bug their parents and remind them to go vote for Principal Steele. So that's been my favorite experience.
I love this idea of tiny constituents and a reminder that that whether they're old enough to vote or not, everyone you serve is equally deserving of your attention and your concern. And for folks who are a little older than tiny but not yet voting, you can make a big difference in so many ways at home or as a volunteer. We are already coming up on the end of our time, but very quickly, I wanted to ask each of you your message to those you think are either still deciding how to vote. And we know there's some folks on the fence, maybe because they're lifelong Republicans, but they know that this just might be the time to finally do something different. Or Amy, you mentioned a lot of people deciding whether to vote. That's probably not the people on this call, but a lot of people out there. So I'd love for each of you just very quickly to share what's your message to people who are still wondering what to do or wondering whether it's worth going out there and taking the trouble to vote. Natalie, why don't you start off?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Pete. You know, for me, it's if people are willing to work the polls, and what you'll typically see when you're going to these polls to go and vote is you see older folks who are putting their lives at risk, you know, wearing their mask, doing the social distancing, because it matters so much. They know what's at stake. They want your voice to be heard regardless of what party you're voting for, and they're putting their lives at risk. I think that we owe it to them, we owe it to our country to just take that step to have our voice to be heard. And, you know, there are just so many ways that we can protect ourselves, where bring hand sanitizer, whatever it is. If you don't think this election is important enough, then I don't think you'll ever think an election is important enough. Right now, there is just way too much at stake. And so if now, not when, I mean, when, if now, not when. And so please do so.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ricky, you've been a communicator for a living. How do you communicate with people who are still deciding whether to come off the sidelines and vote?
Honestly, I talk to independents and Republicans, maybe even more so than Democrats, because my parents are lifelong Republicans. And I know that we're not as divisive as the media and our politics would want us all to think that we are. You know, I talk to Cuban American Republicans that are voting for Trump, who say, "Oh, I can be bipartisan. I can be bipartisan." I'm like, exactly, because we have to talk about the issues. You know, we have to talk about healthcare. We have to talk about protecting our parents. We have to talk about investing in our children in public schools, and we have to talk about the environment. You know, those are things that down here in South Florida are not changing unless we make that effort. And so I tell people, you know, you vote for who you want to vote for, but make sure that it's based on the issues that matter most to you, and not on what some pundit or some political advertisement is telling you to do.
Well said. Principal Steele, last word goes to you. What do you say to somebody who's not sure yet if they're going to exercise that all-important right?
Well, I say two things. Number one, RBG worked up until her very last day. The least we can do is exercise our very public right to vote by going ahead and doing that one act of service that will literally determine how we do life for the next decade or the next century. So that's one thing I share. The second thing I share is I want everyone to remember what this moment is and how they're going to feel on November 4th. On November 4th, are you going to be happy with your efforts before November 3rd? So if you're not going to be happy with those efforts, or you don't know how you're going to feel, make sure you go vote so you can have a say-so in how you're going to feel on November 4th. Everyone remembers how they felt in 2016, the day after the election. And we are in charge of how we feel or how we will feel on November 4th, 2020. So get her done.
What a great note to end on. Thank you again to each of you. I see in the chat box it's lighting up with people who are inspired by you. So let's all repay that inspiration by making sure we're doing what we can to make sure that Ricky and Natalie and Amy are elected and all of our great Win the Era candidates. Contribute financially if you can. There are links on how to do that or information on our website. Volunteer if you can. One of the great upsides to the moment we're in is the ability to get involved in voter outreach from a long distance, or maybe you're a constituent in one of their districts. And let's keep lifting each other up these next 2 weeks. 2020 has been rough for us all, but we get to write the last and most important chapter in the story of 2020. You're doing it right now. And Coach Stevens, thank you for literally walking the walk of what we're asking all Americans to do, which is to not be on the sidelines at a time like this. We're so thankful for your leadership and your voice, and so glad you chose to spend time helping us lift one another up and be motivated to get out there and make a difference. Here we go. Buckle up. And again, a big thank you to everybody who took the time to be part of this. Stay strong, stay safe, stay motivated, and let's give ourselves a lot to celebrate for what I hope will be a very joyous post-election season call with all of you before too long. Take care.